As Udo stood in her engagement dress, tears streaming down her face, her family laughter echoed around her like knives. They called her cursed, unwanted, finished. But just weeks later, when the most powerful man in the city went down on one knee before her, their mocking turned to stunned silence. And that's when Udo's real story began. Not of shame, but of triumph they never saw coming. Udo was a simple, kind woman who always dreamed of a happy life. She came from a modest family, but her heart was big, and she believed in love. She thought she had found her forever when Decker, the man she loved, asked her to marry him. She trusted him with all her heart, believing they would build a beautiful future together. The day of their engagement party was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. She wore her best dress, her face glowing with hope and joy, but everything shattered in a moment. Right in front of everyone, Decker stood up and said he couldn't go through with the wedding. He looked down at Udo with cold eyes and said she wasn't good enough for him anymore. He said he was rising in status, meeting important people now, and that Udo would only drag him down. His words cut through her like a knife. The guests gasped, but no one defended her. Udo stood frozen, her heart breaking into pieces. But the worst pain came not from Decker, but from her own family. Instead of standing by her side, they laughed and whispered behind her back. Her mother said she brought shame to the family. Her cousins called her bad luck, saying no man would ever want her now. Even her father shook his head and told her she was rejected like garbage. Udo's tears fell as their cruel words echoed in her ears. The people she loved the most turned against her when she needed them most. She felt alone, humiliated, and broken, standing there in her torn engagement dress, wondering if she would ever recover from this pain. As if Udo's heart wasn't already broken, things got even worse when she returned home. Her own family, the people who were supposed to comfort her, became her biggest pain. Her mother, Abeni, didn't even try to hide her anger and shame. She sat in the living room with Udo's aunties and cousins, laughing and gossiping loudly. They said Udo was cursed, that her bad luck would destroy the family's name forever. They called her a disgrace, saying no one would want to marry into a family with such shame hanging over it. Her cousins whispered, but they made sure Udo could hear every word. They said, "Look at her, rejected like a stray dog. No man will ever look at her again." They laughed and shook their heads, as if Udo was something to be pitied and mocked at the same time. And then, to make it even more painful, they started comparing her to her younger sister, Adana. "At least Adana knows how to catch rich suitors," one cousin said. "Not like Udo, who can't even keep one man." Their words felt like sharp knives in Udo's chest, cutting her pride into tiny pieces. Her sister Adana didn't stop them. She just smiled quietly, secretly pleased to be the golden one, while Udo was being dragged through the mud. Udo stood there, her eyes full of tears, but no one cared about her pain. They were too busy blaming her for everything. And then her father, the man she hoped would defend her, looked at her with cold disappointment. "You've shamed us enough," he said. "It's better you stay inside for a while. Hide your face until people forget this disgrace." His words crushed the last bit of hope inside Udo. She felt small, worthless, like her life was over. No comfort, no love, only cruel laughter that followed her everywhere in the house. She wanted to scream, but her voice was lost in the noise of their mocking. All she could do was cry in silence, wondering how her own family became her worst enemies. Udo locked herself inside her small room, her tears falling like rain. She cried until her throat hurt, until her eyes were swollen shut. Every word her family said echoed in her head. Cursed, disgrace, useless. She felt broken, like her heart had shattered into pieces that could never be put back together. She looked at her torn engagement dress lying on the floor and hugged her knees, feeling like her life was over. No one cared about her pain. No one defended her. Even the people who were supposed to love her had turned their backs. Alone in that tiny room, it felt like the whole world was against her. But in the middle of her pain, Udo suddenly remembered something, her late grandmother's voice. She could almost hear her soft words again, the ones she used to say whenever life got hard. "My child, when the world pushes you down, you rise. You rise stronger than before." Those words lit a small fire in Udo's broken heart. She wiped her tears, even though they kept coming. She looked around her little room and saw the tools and materials she had pushed aside long ago. Beads, threads, fabrics. She used to love making beautiful things with her hands, But after meeting Decker, she stopped, thinking love was all she needed. Now, sitting on the cold floor, Udo made a decision. She would not let this shame destroy her. She would not let their laughter be the end of her story. Slowly, she picked up her old tools, her fingers shaky but determined. She started crafting again, pouring every bit of her pain, her anger, and her sadness into the pieces. As her hands moved, something inside her started to heal. Every bead she placed, every thread she wove, felt like stitching her broken heart back together. The colours she chose were bold and strong, nothing like the weak, broken girl they all called her. Day and night, she worked, sometimes forgetting to eat or sleep. Her small room became her little world where she was in control. No one could mock her there. No one could call her cursed. With each piece she finished, she felt a little stronger, a little braver. The tears didn't stop at once, but slowly her pain started turning into power. Udo was rising, just like her grandmother said, and deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning. The same hands they laughed at were about to create something no one could ever laugh at again. Udo had no idea that her life was about to change the day she decided to take her crafts to the local trade fair. Her heart was still hurting, but she had worked day and night to prepare for this event. She carefully packed her handmade jewelry, bags, and decorations, every piece carrying her pain and her hope. When she arrived at the fair, her small table was pushed to the side, far from the big fancy stalls. People walked past without even looking at her, but Udo stayed calm. She arranged her work neatly, smiling softly at anyone who glanced her way, even though deep down she still felt small and invisible. But then Omari walked in. He wasn't just any man. He was one of the richest and most powerful businessmen in the city, known for building a global brand from scratch. People whispered when they saw him. They said he had an eye for hidden treasures, things others overlooked. As he strolled through the fair, nothing really caught his attention until he reached Udo's little stall. He stopped. His eyes scanned the bright colours, the detailed designs, the beauty in every piece. But more than that, he noticed the woman behind the table, quiet, humble, yet there was something unbreakable in her eyes. Omari picked up one of her necklaces, turning it over in his hands. The quality was stunning, the design unique. He looked at Udo and asked, "Did you make these yourself?" Udo nodded shyly, her voice barely above a whisper, but that was enough. Omari could see her strength hidden beneath her soft words. He asked her more questions about her work, and the more she spoke, the more impressed he became. This was not just talent. This was raw, powerful art, born from pain and courage. Right there, in the middle of the noisy fair, Omari made her an offer. He told her he wanted her to supply her products to his international stores. Udo's eyes widened, her heart pounding so hard she could barely believe what she was hearing. She thought it was a dream, but Omari smiled warmly and said, "The world needs to see your work. Let's make that happen." Tears filled Udo's eyes, but this time they were not from pain, they were from hope. She couldn't even speak properly, just nodded again and again. As Omari handed her his card and told her they would meet to discuss the details, Udo felt a spark light up inside her. For the first time in a long while, someone saw her worth. Not as someone's rejected fiancé, not as her family's disgrace, but as an artist, a creator, a woman of strength. And just like that, with one chance meeting, Udo's journey took a new, powerful turn. Udo's life changed faster than she ever imagined. After signing the deal with Omari, her small business suddenly exploded. Orders started pouring in, not just from her town, but from big cities, and even from other countries. People who once walked past her without looking were now begging to buy her designs. Shop owners in the market, who used to gossip about her failed engagement, now whispered her name with respect. They called her the woman who turned pain into gold. Every corner of the market knew about Udo, the rising star. With the success came a new Udo. She no longer dressed in the old faded clothes that made her blend into the background. Now she wore beautiful, simple outfits that showed off her colourful culture and confidence. Her head was always high, her back straight, and her steps firm. When she walked through the market, people moved aside, nodding at her with admiration. The same cousins and neighbours who once laughed at her now greeted her with forced smiles, trying to hide their jealousy. But Udo didn't pay them any mind. She was too busy building her new life, Every morning, she woke up early, checking her orders, speaking to suppliers, and managing her growing team. Her little room that once held only tears and sadness was now filled with raw materials, designs, and energy. Her phone never stopped ringing with new opportunities. Through it all, Omari stayed close, guiding her like a true mentor. He taught her how to handle big clients, how to price her products fairly, and how to protect her growing brand. But something else quietly started to grow between them. It wasn't loud or obvious, but every time Omari smiled at her with pride, Udo felt her heart flutter. And when she looked at him, she noticed how his eyes always softened when he spoke to her. Their talks about business sometimes turned into long conversations about dreams, life, and even small jokes that made them both laugh. Udo's confidence bloomed more each day, not just because of the money, but because she finally believed in herself. She was no longer the woman who was rejected and mocked. She was Udo, a successful businesswoman, a creator, and someone worthy of respect and love. And though she didn't say it out loud, deep inside, she knew her rise was only just beginning. As Udo's success continued to grow, the same family that once laughed at her suddenly started acting sweet. Her mother, Abeni, now called her every day, pretending to check on her. Her cousins, who once mocked her as bad luck, now showed up at her door with fake smiles, saying they were proud of her. But behind their smiles, jealousy was boiling like hot water. They couldn't believe the same Udo they had rejected was now shining brighter than all of them. Soon they started spreading ugly rumors. They told anyone who would listen that Udo didn't get successful by hard work. They whispered that some rich man was secretly backing her, giving her money and opening doors for her. She's just lucky Omari noticed her, they said. Without him, she would still be nothing. Their words were full of poison, trying to pull her back down. But Udo had learned to ignore them. She stayed focused, letting her work and success speak louder than their lies. Then, out of nowhere, Deka, her ex-fiancé, came crawling back into her life. The same man who had humiliated her in front of everyone now stood at her shop, smiling like nothing had happened. He said he'd made a mistake, that he missed her, and that they should get back together. But Udo could see through his sweet words. It wasn't love that brought Deka back, it was her success. He saw her new glow, her rising fame, and wanted to enjoy the benefits. Deka even tried to charm her, bringing small gifts and calling her beautiful, acting like he had never broken her heart. But Udo, standing tall and proud, remembered the pain he caused. She didn't feel weak anymore. She looked at Deka with calm eyes and knew deep inside that she had outgrown him and everyone else who once looked down on her. Her family's fake support and Deka's sudden interest only made Udo stronger. She understood now that success attracts both praise and envy, but she wasn't going to let their jealousy slow her down. With every rumor they spread and every fake smile they gave, Udo's fire burned brighter. She was on a new path, and there was no turning back. The night of the family dinner was supposed to be special. Everyone was gathered, her parents, cousins, and even old friends. Laughter filled the room, but underneath it, everyone was watching Udo. They knew something big was about to happen. And then, right there in front of everyone, Deka stood up, holding out a shiny ring. He smiled wide and said, "Udo, let's forget the past. Marry me now, and let's start fresh." The whole room went silent. Her mother's eyes lit up with fake joy. Thinking this was Udo's chance to fix her shame, her cousins whispered, already planning how they would brag about this in town. They all believed Udo would be so desperate to get her honor back that she would say yes without thinking. But Udo, dressed in her elegant outfit that showed how far she had come, stayed calm. She looked at Deka, the man who once crushed her spirit in public. Then she looked around at the family who had laughed at her pain, and with a steady voice she said, "No." The air froze. Everyone gasped so loud it felt like the walls shook. Her mother nearly dropped her cup. Deka's smile disappeared as fast as it came. Udo stood up slowly and said, "I would rather stand alone in truth than sit beside someone who once threw me away like garbage. I am not the same woman you rejected." Her words cut through the room like a knife. No one dared to speak. Deka stood there, looking foolish, the ring still in his hand. Udo's heart was calm, strong like never before. She turned away from the table, her head high, her steps steady. Every eye followed her as she walked out. not as a woman desperate for approval, but as a woman who had chosen her self-worth over shallow praise. Her rejection didn't just silence them, it shook them. In that moment, Udo showed them that real power comes from knowing your value, not from people's fake acceptance. And as she left that dinner behind, she knew she had finally broken free from the chains they once wrapped around her. The grand gala night was filled with lights, music, and important people from all over the city. Udo stood on the big stage, her heart beating fast but proud. She was being honored for helping and inspiring so many women with her success story. The same woman who was once mocked and rejected was now shining brightly. Her family sat in the crowd, their faces mixed with shock and forced smiles. They never thought this day would come. As Udo finished her speech and thanked everyone, the hall clapped loudly. But before she could step down, Omari, dressed in his fine suit, walked toward the stage. At first, people thought he wanted to say a few words as her business mentor, but then he did something no one expected. Right there, in front of the entire audience, he got down on one knee and brought out a beautiful ring. The hall went silent in surprise. Omari looked up at Udo with deep respect in his eyes. His voice was steady but full of emotion as he said, "Udo, I have watched you rise with courage and grace. I don't love you because of your success. I love you for your strength, your kindness, and the woman you've become. Will you marry me?" The cameras flashed everywhere. The crowd gasped, then waited, holding their breath. Udo's eyes filled with tears, but these were not sad tears. These were tears of joy, of healing, of finally being seen for who she truly was. She looked around and saw her family frozen in disbelief, their mouths open. Decker, her ex, looked like the ground had been pulled from under him. The moment felt like a dream, but it was real. Udo slowly nodded, her lips trembling as she whispered, "Yes." The crowd erupted in loud cheers and applause. People stood up clapping, celebrating this powerful moment. Cameras caught every second, her tear-streaked smile and Omari's joyful face. That night, Udo wasn't just honored with an award. She was honored with true love and respect, the kind no one could ever take away from her again. And the world watched, inspired by her journey from pain to power, from rejection to love. Suddenly, the same family that once laughed at Udo and called her bad luck started acting differently. Now that the whole city was celebrating her, they began to pretend they had always been on her side. Her mother, Abeni, went around telling neighbors, "Udo is our pride. We always knew she would make us proud." Her cousins, who once gossiped and mocked her, now called her the shining star of the family. Even her father, who once told her to hide her face, now bragged that he raised a strong woman. But Udo was no longer the same woman who cried quietly in her room. She had found her voice. One afternoon, during a family gathering, they all surrounded her with fake smiles, clapping and saying how they always believed in her strength. Udo looked at each of them, calm but firm. She reminded them, one by one, of the harsh words they had thrown at her when she was at her lowest. "Mother, you said my bad luck would ruin the family name. Cousins, you laughed and called me a shame. Father, you told me to hide my face. But today, you want to call me your pride." Her voice was soft, but the truth hit them like thunder. The room went quiet. No one could meet her eyes. Their fake smiles faded, replaced by shame and discomfort. Udo took a deep breath and continued. She said she was starting something new, a foundation to help women who had been rejected and broken, just like she once was. But she made it clear, this was not to clean her family's image or make them look good in front of society. This is for women who need real help, real hope, not for those who only love you when you shine, she said. Her words left her family stunned. They realized they couldn't claim her success as their own, not after all the pain they caused. Udo stood tall, her heart free from the need for their approval. She had chosen her path, not for shallow praise, but to lift others up, just as she had lifted herself. And in that moment, her family finally felt the weight of their past cruelty. Udo's life had truly changed. She and Omari decided to marry, but they didn't want a loud, flashy wedding. Instead, they chose a small but beautiful ceremony, with only people who truly loved and supported Udo. No fake smiles, no shallow praises, just real joy. As she walked down the aisle, dressed in simple but elegant white, tears of happiness filled her eyes. Omari stood waiting, not as a man saving her, but as someone who respected and admired the strong woman she had become. When they exchanged vows, everyone could feel the deep love between them. It was pure, honest, and powerful. After the wedding, Udo's business continued to grow. Her handmade crafts were no longer just items sold in local market. They now reached countries far beyond. People from different parts of Africa and even beyond the continent admired her work. But more than her products, they admired her story. Udo became a symbol of strength and hope for many women who had faced rejection and pain. She was invited to speak at events, sharing how she turned her tears into triumph. Her foundation helped hundreds of women start their own businesses, giving them the chance to rise, just like she did. One evening, Udo stood on the balcony of her beautiful new home. The cool breeze touched her face as she looked out at the city lights below. The same city that once whispered about her shame was now celebrating her success. She thought back to the days when she cried alone in her small room, feeling broken and useless. But now, standing tall and free, she smiled softly. She was no longer that girl who was left in the rain, heartbroken and humiliated. She had turned every betrayal, every cruel word, into a power that lifted her higher. Udo knew this was just the beginning, and her heart felt light and full of joy.